Hello and welcome to episode 54 of Beyond a Sermon, West End Assembly of God's weekly program where we dig deeper into this past Sunday's message and extract from it practicalities that can help us through our daily lives, the other days of the week, Monday through Saturday, and the weeks ahead and so forth. And we have joining me, I'm your show host, Jim Washock, and with me is our lead pastor, Shane Schlesman, who delivered this past Sunday's sermon. So hello again, Shane.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for watching and tuning in. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had quite a relevant, applicable, hard-hitting, down-to-earth sermon this week, Shane, on you titled Anxiety Attack.
Yeah, this has been kind of the nature of this series, Broken and Beautiful, because we just decided we're going to talk about some of these hard, difficult places in life that all of us struggle with. There's probably nobody that hasn't been touched somehow with anxiety in some way. So it's a great and very relevant topic for all of us.
Absolutely. And that's clearly been reflected in some of the questions that have come in, the comments that have been posted online, the weekly workshops that those of you that have watched this program and that during this series so far know that are offered on Monday evenings. We had a record number of folks turn out last night, which is
really
great. So great that they took that opportunity and that resource available to them. And no doubt we'll have more about that a little later on. Do want to remind those that may have missed this past Sunday's sermon that it is available for you to watch anytime online. You can go to weag.church or go to our YouTube channel that just search for WEAG TV and you'll be able to easily find it. And on our website at weag.church, for those of you that saw the sermon, you may recall that Shane went over a number of stats at the beginning as to how pervasive an issue anxiety is. And so those stats are included there on that sermon page too, in case you wanted to reference some of those yourself. So
yeah, it's a huge problem, and it faces so many of our loved ones, so many of our people in our community, and so many people in our church.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shane, as a someone who struggled for a number of years, when in my early 20s with bona fide panic attacks that I got to tell you, when they started, scared the living daylights out of me. Thank you for covering this, because I've met so many people since that have talked about, you mentioned having anxiety attacks, panic attacks. And so I know this is something that a lot of people deal with.
Yeah. For sure.
But some folks maybe watching are not familiar with anxiety attacks. So our very first question, Shane, is what exactly is an anxiety attack? What does it feel like for those people that don't know?
Well, first of all, say it with me. I'm not a doctor, okay?
We need a flashing disclaimer at the bottom of the screen.
I don't even play one on television, okay? I'm a preacher, and I preach the Word of God, and God's Word speaks to every issue in life. And certainly it speaks a lot to anxiety and the struggles that we have with our worries, our anxious thoughts, and the impact they have in our lives. But we don't believe that God just created some truth. We believe that God created all truth. And so if you're experiencing anxiety, you need to see a doctor. You need to see a counselor. You need to see a psychiatrist. You need to see people who not just treating it from one perspective. Don't just come to church, but you also shouldn't just go to a doctor. That part of the solution is coming to church. But I will answer the question, even though I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to answer it right from a study you can look up on the internet as well, just as simple as I can. But I do want to, it's a good question to answer, even though I'm not qualified to diagnose it. I can read the same symptoms that you can, according to DSM-5. Here's what panic attacks are experienced as a sudden sense of fear and dread, plus 4 or more of the following mental, emotional, and physical symptoms. So let me read that again. Panic attacks are experienced as a sudden sense of fear or dread, plus 4 or more of the following mental, emotional, and physical symptoms, of which we brought with us today for you to look at. There are so many things like heart palpitations, accelerated heart rate, excessive sweating, trembling or shaking, shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea, These are all symptoms: feeling dizzy or lightheaded, chills or hot flashes, the fear of losing control or going crazy. You just feel like you're going nuts, and or the pervasive fear of dying, feelings of numbness, tingling sensations. Again, it's not just one of these things. If you're experiencing any of these things, you should see a doctor, okay? But they can help you determine how many of these, that coupled with some fear or dread or feelings of emotions that you have inside of you that are welling up. The truth is, the situations around us in life, there is never a good time for anxiety, but there are always reasons for anxiety, and there are always plenty of things to be anxious about. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the circumstances around. It is a physical reaction happening, and you need to talk to a doctor. If you're experiencing any of these symptoms at all, please go talk to your doctor about it. Go talk to a counselor, and come to church and hear what I believe is the foundational truth of what to do once you are experiencing anxiety too.
Yeah. So for those of you that have not experienced an anxiety attack, you can see from this list, it's quite some serious feelings and that you experience. And I got to say, I haven't read the list after you provided it. I've experienced all of these when I was going through it.
Wow.
Not always all of them at the same time with every episode, but literally every single one of those.
Wow.
And of course, the scariest thing is many of these things relate or they're similar to like real life-threatening conditions.
Of course.
Yeah,
you can feel like a heart attack, for instance, or it can feel like a stroke. It can feel like all kinds of things, heat stroke, or and you may actually be experiencing anxiety.
Yeah. So it's a really scary thing. But Shane, I got to tell you, I remember from my own personal experience, I was wondering if, because I'd never heard about anxiety attacks beforehand. This was back in 95 when I mean, not 95, 92 when I had my first one.
Wow.
I remember thinking, is
You
my
were 3,
being anxious?
right? In
Yeah,
92.
I was only 3. Yeah, I'm not yet. I remember thinking, is being anxious, worried, or in a panic abnormal? Is it reflective of a weak faith on my part? Is it even a sin? And you talked in your sermon about a lot of it having to do with us trying to hold on to control too.
Yeah.
So what?
It's not a sin.
Okay, good.
It's reflective not of sin. It's reflective of a human condition.
Okay.
And in our human condition, it isn't. If you worry, you're normal. Okay. If you have anxiety, you're probably normal. That's probably a normal thing. If you're having panic attacks like you've described, that's not physically normal. And there are things that need to be figured out. But having worry is not reflective of a sin condition. It's reflective of a human condition. But what you do with your worry can be reflective of a sin condition.
Okay.
So what we do with our anxiety, what we do with our worry, that's the problem. What we do with it. And so this is the part where, control. Peter teaches us in 1 Peter 5 to the suffering church who talk about anxiety regarding their conditions. They were suffering and people were dying in their church for their faith, and it was a suffering church. They were a church under massive persecution. And so he writes to them about their anxious feelings, about their anxiety, and he warns them against the attacks, not of physical panic attacks, but of the spiritual attacks that the enemy uses, anxiety, to get to us. And the answer to that was actually humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. You're going to hear me say that a million times, so I apologize for the repetition, but we need to hear this repetition.
Sure.
Because this human condition of anxiety is not sinful, but what we do with it could be sinful. Because it says that God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. There is an aspect, he quotes that proverb, Peter quotes that proverb, and there is an aspect of what we do with our worry that could become sinful. You know, you've heard that funny thing. You know what your mom used to say? You're going to worry me to death, okay? So you're going to worry me to death. And really what we do with our worry, our worry can impact our family members, our relationships, our work. It can impact ourselves. It can even impact other people in such a negative way that it becomes sinful. So the answer to it is found in Peter's words, and I think the simple answer to this question is no.
Yeah.
Having anxiety is not sinful. What you do with it is what determines that answer.
Okay, thank you. I remember another thing that came to mind when I was suffering this, and I've heard it from some others as well, is that as a Christian, where you feel like you're supposed to trust God, is it shameful for me to experience anxiety attacks? Is that a trust issue?
That's a great question. First, let me deal with the wording of the question, not to get into semantics.
Okay.
But as a Christ follower, nothing is shameful. Shameful, something that's shameful, is actually a word owned by the enemy, by devil himself, okay? Look at it in Genesis chapter 3 if you don't believe me. Okay, that's where already the serpent, it says, came into creation, into God's perfect creation, and began to mess with it by creating shame. After the first sin, they were ashamed of themselves. Being ashamed is something the enemy took control of to say, when you blow it and when you make mistakes, your mistakes define you. That is not a definition that Christ ever gives anyone.
Yeah.
So there is no such thing. There's no such thing as shameful with Christ, because Christ defined who you are regardless of you screwing up or not. Jesus redefined who you are based on who he is, and that definition is for eternity. So
nice. That's comforting. Very comforting,
so
for sure.
I just wanted to make that clear to the person asking that question as well. But really, in that definition then of being a Christ follower, he says again, humble yourselves. How? Well, not just be humble. He wasn't just saying be humble. He was saying humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. Remember who sets your definition. Remember who gave you that definition of who you are for all eternity. You are beautiful. You are someone who Jesus died for. You are the person he cares for so much. God so loved the world that he gave his only son. That defines your value. Then God said, no matter what, whoever believes in me will not perish but have everlasting life. That defines God's value system. And in his promise and his thing that never lasts forever, remember that we are coming under the promises of God. And when we have anxiety, the very first thing that we need to do, it's not shameful for us at all. In fact, the very first thing we need to do is come to God. He said, cast your anxiety on him. Cast all your anxiety on him. Why? Because he cares for you. So let's stop letting the world define us because we have anxiety, as if it is so shameful. Oh, you shouldn't worry. You're a Christian. Really? Well, then why does over and over and over again does Jesus and others who speak to Christians in the Bible say over and over again, don't worry? Why? Because he knows you're going to worry.
He knows this quite well.
Yes,
yes, very well.
He knows this really well. He's not wondering whether you're going to worry.
Yeah.
He says, so humble yourself. Come, bring yourself under God's definitions, not the world's definitions of what anxiety looks like and what it should be like. Humble yourselves under God's mighty hand.
All right.
I told you you're going to hear that phrase a lot,
yes,
so I'm just warning.
Indeed. Shane, we're going to pause for just a quick moment. I do want to remind viewers that you can ask questions right now live. If you're watching at this moment, we do record this live at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays. Typically works out well that way each week. But if by chance, even if you're watching on demand at a later point in time, you can still ask your questions at any point. We will still get those to Shane, but you have an opportunity, if you're watching live right now, now's your time to be able to get a direct answer from him. Simply text your question into the number. It'll come to my phone right here, and I'll go ahead and read it off to him. So Shane, now that we've addressed for the viewers what anxiety attacks are, and then there's no need to hide from it, hide from others, hide from God. Now, where does anxiety come from? Is it, are we inviting it in to our lives?
Great question. Well, first of all, and I'm sensing my answers probably need to get more condensed so we can get through them all. But
yeah, we do have a few more for
the
sure.
simple answer is physical. The source of our anxiety can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be spiritual. Yes. Are we inviting it in? Absolutely. I mean, I carry around a phone. You carry around a phone. It's a 24/7 reminder of all the anxious things that are happening in the world nonstop and whatever, or a reflection of me. There you go. I was a reflection of me.
Yes.
It can be a reflection of you. But
your phone illustration, by the way, was hilarious. Just so
Yeah,
if you
you
missed
have
the
control.
sermon, you really got to watch this for many reasons. But that was
I teach you something
nice,
very, very powerful about your phone that
Indeed.
probably you are not aware of. I don't care how great an expert you are, how techie you are. I bet you weren't aware of this one. So, yes, we carry that around with us all the time. So, of course, there's a direct line to us with anxious circumstances and situations around us all the time. Guarding our intake is a part of what we can get into in the treatment of this, but the source of it isn't just those situations. The source of it can be within me. When you started having panic attacks, it may not even been associated with something that was, or it could be. It could be emotion. It could be associated with something traumatic. PTSD is just one form of anxiety, or one aspect of that. And so when I have a traumatic event happen, I may start having panic attacks and have no idea why. It has nothing, doesn't seem to relate. A plus B doesn't seem to equal, like it shouldn't equal that, but A equals C, but it does. So physical, emotional, spiritual, all of these can be sources for anxiety.
Now, I recall when I was going through it that much of it, or a contributing factor, had to do with my perspective. And so I remember thinking, though, at the time, and others I know grapple with this, how come trying to force my thoughts to think differently doesn't seem to work too well? What is the fix for that? How do we correctly align our thoughts?
This is the challenge of our faith. Someone says a true faith, like whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever just, think on these things. And then the promise follows that. And then as soon as that doesn't happen, we go, this doesn't work.
You only give it a little sliver of a chance, right?
It's not a pill. You can't take it and then, hey, doc, this isn't working. Faith is not a pill I take that somehow miraculously makes me think differently. Our minds, God created us very complex, but here's the irony of all of this, that faith doesn't focus on the origin of our anxiety being the issue. In fact, the origin of our anxiety is not as important as the treatment of our anxiety. But ironically, the treatment of your anxiety will probably lead you to the origin of your anxiety. And what I mean by that is, if you're not just taking a pill and you're actually seeing a counselor, they're going to help you find the source of your anxiety. That's what counselors do. They go on a journey. They go down the rabbit hole with you and they figure out where all this is coming from. But most of us have control issues and we don't want to talk to anybody about that stuff. So we want to keep all that stuff hidden because it's shameful. And just go right down the list. It's shameful, so I can't talk about it. So therefore I stay in control of my own treatment. You stay your own doctor. You just be your own doctor. Give me the pill. That's all I need from you. Then I'll be okay. And you'll keep taking that and you'll be imprisoned by it forever. Unless you can find the source. However, in our faith works regardless of the source of our anxiety. Our faith is actually a way to treat and to figure out our anxiety. It's not a magic pill that I can take and all my anxiety goes away. Over and over again in Scripture we're told, be courageous, be strong and courageous, fear not, don't be afraid, don't be anxious, don't be worried. Why? Because he knew that there was plenty to be afraid of and plenty to be worried about and plenty to be anxious about. So the origin isn't as important as the treatment, but the treatment, good treatment, takes faith, our holistic approach to treatment, and actually leads us to the origin.
Yeah.
Whether that be traumatic event, thoughts, a stage of my life, or a physical thing that I'm going through, or all of them.
Shana, along these lines, I remember, I can attest for folks, one of the worst things you could do is is hide it. I got to add to that from my own experience. You've got to be willing to talk about it with somebody, anyone that you could trust, multiple people, small group at a church. I think I was looking for the quick stat. I think you said anxiety disorders, only 36.9% of people that suffer actually receive treatment. And I think somewhere else you mentioned some folks will live in their anxiety for over a decade.
That's right.
There's no need for that.
That was a specific kind of anxiety that people have lived with, a social disorder that people on average live for 10 years before they even seek treatment.
Wow.
That a third, that all anxiety is treatable, yet only a third of the population who have anxiety are actually seeking treatment.
Yeah. This is not something folks need to live with, for
No.
sure. They do not. Shane, we had a viewer ask as well, I'm guessing they struggle with procrastination because they asked the question, is procrastination a direct result of anxiety?
I'll answer that tomorrow. I'm just kidding. It's a great question. What a great question for us. I am, first of all, the president of the procrastination clubs many times over again. And I've thought a lot about why that is. Why do I procrastinate? And I think a lot of procrastination is fear-based. So I am afraid of what will happen. I'm afraid to put myself out there. I'm afraid of it coming back on me. It could be I'm afraid of the shame that I've attached, or maybe times that I've put myself out there and it's gone poorly for me. But we have this idea that when we're presented with something, you've heard this, right? Fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Yeah.
Those are the three reactions that people have to trauma. So something's presented to you, and you either fight, you have flight, you flee, or you freeze. Procrastination is simply the freeze mode in reaction to trauma.
Okay.
And maybe it's traumatic for you to think about which college to choose. It could be traumatic for you to think about what to have for dinner. I don't know. You can really drill it down here because of our anxiousness. And if we're anxious about everything, there is some fear based in that. But there's also a control part of that as well. Because as I've thought about it, I know part of why I remember one of the triggers for me is being told to do something. And there's probably, I'm not alone in that. I know that's the thing. If you tell me to do something, my immediate reaction is to not do it. Because I'm being told to do it. Why? Because I want to be in control.
Right.
I don't want to submit to whoever's telling me that. I want to be in control of it. So one way to stay in control is to do it on your terms. When you want to do it. I'll do it when I want to do it. I'll do it when I get to it. It's usually both of these combined or some version, and I'm not sure what the potion is, of more control or more fear, but both of them are involved. And both of them, the answer is the same. You're going to hear me say it again.
Here we go.
Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. The hand of God that you can trust, by the way. Not always the person who's giving you the command to do the list of things you don't want to do because you don't want to give up control to them. But Peter is saying if you want to beat anxiety, then you have to be willing to give up control to the right source. And the right source is God's mighty hand of control. And if you'll trust God and give him your control, then you can pursue tasks. And whether you tell me or someone else tells me or a deadline's hitting, I can trust God that God, regardless of what school I pick on whatever date or whether I choose to work on my paper or I don't work on my paper, or whether I choose to have that conversation that I've been putting off forever because it's so uncomfortable, if I give total control and trust to God, now suddenly he's got to worry about the outcome of that illustration. He needs to worry about the outcome of which school I pick. He needs to worry, and I need to worry about how much am I trusting God. And if I'm the one who needs to stay in control, you better believe probably procrastination will be a part of it, but only one aspect, and your control might look differently than someone else's, but certainly that's what it's looked like in my life too.
Yeah. Very good. Viewers, want to remind you, again, if you have a question for Shane, go ahead and text it in. Here's the text number for you once again, 804-480-4072. Works both now while we're live, and also if you're catching this show at a later point in time. Go ahead and text your question in. We'll get that question off to Shane. Shane, I know this could be a simple one-word answer and we can move on, but I feel like there's more to it. Is there a legit role for medication, diet, fitness, and rest in how anxiety impacts me? I remember my initial panic attack bout, and doctors attributed to drinking 4 cans of Coke just hours prior. So if you're drinking energy drinks, perhaps stop. If you're suffering from anxiety, that's not helping. So diet.
Yeah.
So,
well, we've all been guilty of this. The answer, yes. The one-word answer is yes. All of it is helpful, and all of it is important. God didn't create one of these truths. He created you to be a physical being, and he gave you endorphins to be released in your body that gave you energy that came from exercise. So sitting on the couch all day long or sitting on a couch all night is not giving you energy. It's draining your energy. God made you that way. I didn't make you that way. Some fitness instructor didn't make you that way. The gym who's trying to get your money didn't make you that way. God made you that way. So you can not listen to God. It's just like people who like to pick one or the other, diet or exercise. It's both, okay? Right. I have a friend that I argue all the time with about, they love diet. Oh, diet's the thing. Oh, I love exercise. Well, they don't exercise and I don't have a good diet, so we can't really argue with each other because we both win. But the point is it's not one thing. It's all of the things that God created. It's not one thing. Are there foods that can make us calmer? Absolutely. Are there exercises? Are there physical treatments? In fact, there's not just doctor's treatments. There are alternative treatments as well. Breathing exercises, the way God made us, if we breathe properly, we can actually calm our heart rate down by breathing techniques. And it sounds hokey and weird to some of you, but it's just true. It's just the way God made us.
Yeah.
It works. And so it isn't just the ends justifies the means, and we're so thinking about whatever works.
Yeah.
I'm not saying just whatever works. I'm saying that God created us as physical, emotional, spiritual beings, and all of it is important. Every part of it is important. There's no part of this equation or solution that is simple or that is not needed, because all of these things are important. And if you want to go from being anxious to insane, keep doing the same thing and expect different result, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
Keep being attached to your phone before you go to bed and wondering why I can't sleep. Keep being attached to the 24/7 cycle of life without having a way to unplug and be able to disconnect. Figuring out patterns that physical exercise, spiritual study of God's word, prayer, community around me, seeing the right doctor, seeing the right counselor, giving up control, and finally willing to invite people in. If you're not willing to do all of those things, then you better be willing to continue to live in the state that you're in. And that's a harsh way to say, hey, God doesn't want you to live this way. He wants you to get help. All of these things are important. So let God humble yourself under God's mighty hand. Trust him. His hand will guide you to the right place.
He said it again. Humble yourself before the Lord.
I might even try to fit it with one more time.
And in fact, it fits perfectly with this next question, because this question was, I love this question that we got, because I can definitely relate to it. The challenge of reconciling scripture verses that almost seem at odds with one another about not worrying, on one hand, fully trusting God, but on the other hand, being a responsible steward of time, money, and resources by planning ahead. That almost creates anxiety in and of itself. Shane, what do we do with that?
Yes, and just because we say humble ourselves under God's mighty hand, that means we give up control. It doesn't mean we give up management.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
So God's given you the resources to manage. In fact, you don't have to exercise if you don't want to. You don't have to eat right if you don't want to. You don't have to see a doctor if you don't want to. You don't ever have to see a counselor the rest of your life if you don't want to. But humble yourself under God's mighty hand. He's going to guide you to some of these things. And if you really did trust him, and you really were able to trust him, then you would manage the resources that God has given you. And it's like that old joke about the person who drowned and went to heaven, right? And they said, God, I prayed that I wouldn't drown, and I drowned. Why am I here? I should still be alive. You didn't answer my prayer. Don't you care? That's what the disciples asked in their storm, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you doing asleep? Don't you care that we're about to drown?
Right.
Well, this drowning victim went to heaven. He says, what are you talking about? I sent you prayed, and I sent you a boat. Oh, I just thought that was a boat. I said, I trust God. I sent you a helicopter. Oh, I just said, I trust God. I sent you, and he sent you all these things, and you didn't take advantage of any of them. So yeah, here we are in heaven. That's what happens. So managing the resources that God has given us is wise stewardship. So because we give God control doesn't mean that he doesn't still give us management. So both are important. But understand whose resources we're managing. They're not ours. Humbling ourselves under God's mighty hand gives up control, but it accepts the responsibility of management at the same time. You need to manage your time, manage the resources that God has given you so that you can live healthy.
Very good. Shane, towards the end of your sermon, you talked about courage.
Yeah.
And no doubt there's ways that, we just talked about how you got to be courageous and not even hiding this, of really inviting others in. In what ways and how can the church help me overcome anxiety?
I think I'll answer it this way, that part of the trouble with anxiety is not always the facts. It's how we interpret the facts.
Okay.
And the church can help us interpret the facts. Peter said that the answer to resisting this kind of anxiety attack, not as in a physical anxiety attack, but as anxiety is attacking you and the enemy of anxiety is attacking you and trying to keep you anxious, that the answer was to humble yourselves under God's mighty hand, right? I said it a million times, million and one. But he also said, stand firm in the faith. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Stand firm in the faith. Well, standing firm in the faith is not about the facts themselves. It's about how I see the facts.
Right.
So Peter found himself in a storm and he said, Jesus, if it's really you, tell me to come out to you and walk on the water. And he said, it really is I. Don't be afraid. It's me. I'm not a ghost. Okay. And Peter says, well, if it's really you, tell me to come out. He says, come out. It's me. So Peter begins to walk on water. It's amazing.
Right.
He's interpreting the facts as Jesus is who he said he was. And if he tells me to walk on water, I can do it. But then as he gets out on the water, he interprets the facts differently. He sees the waves and the wind crashing on him and all these things and he begins to take his eyes off of Jesus. And suddenly he begins to interpret the facts as I'm going to drown.
I should not be able to do this. That's right. Yeah.
So faith is not changing the facts. Faith is reinterpreting the facts. Because Jesus said that he has plans for you, not to harm you, but to prosper you. He has plans that include a future and a hope. And he said that to a group of people who were in exile and held captive by another nation, who were in slavery. And how could you say that, God? Look at the facts.
Yeah.
We're in Babylon. We're slaves to another people. How can you say that you have plans to prosper? I can say that because of a promise that I have, and I know where we're going. And if you humble yourselves and put your life in my mighty hand, then I will guide you out of this, and I will reinterpret the facts. This is not a setback, but a setup. This is God's opportunity to set you up and to be a part of your story, how God overcame the anxiety inside of you. And I can't wait to be a part of that story. I hope you'll come and join us here at West End Assembly of God. Let us come around you. You may never feel, as Peter felt, the hand of God itself reaching out physically. Peter physically had the hand of God reach down. He said, Lord, I'm drowning. And Jesus reaches his hand and pulls him out. He doesn't scold him for worrying about the waves. You should have never taken your eyes off.
Yeah.
He gets him back in the boat. He reorientates him, and as soon as he gets in the boat, the storm stops. And then he teaches him and says, now I've got a faith lesson for you. I think faith is the reinterpretation of facts from God's eyes, not our own eyes. And we need people to come alongside us sometimes and remind us, what does it look like from God's perspective? And I would be honored to be a part of that in your life. Or if you have a church that you can go to, I would encourage you, let them help you interpret the facts around you, and maybe, just maybe, God can interpret them through the lens of faith and change your perspective altogether.
Yeah. Whether you're local in Richmond or far away, we've got resources that are online and here on site that we can offer up to help. So
absolutely.
We have a website that you can, an email address. We do have a website. Yes, we do have a website. You can go to the website, weag.church, but we have a contact form on there. But you can also email counseling@weag.org. It's WEAG.org, counseling@weag.org. If you would like to inquire about any of the helpful resources that we may have. Does not necessarily mean you need counseling. Just hit that email address nonetheless. Get in touch with us. We'll talk over the situation that you're in and provide some resources, right, Shane?
Absolutely.
So it might be a small group. It might be getting involved somewhere. Could be online video study. There's all sorts of stuff we have available.
Yeah.
So, well, Shane, I feel like we could do like a whole nother half hour on a topic like this, but we certainly can't. We must move on to other tasks and so forth. But we've got Broken and Beautiful is not ending yet. There's more coming up. What can folks expect this coming Sunday? Yeah,
this Sunday is something that we all struggle with, and I think are anxious about. So that is, there's a real brokenness in the way we manage finances. And, I almost thought maybe I shouldn't even talk about this because people automatically think it's about, how does the church get money or something. This is about, we're just one of those families that you walk into that we talk about stuff. And we need to talk about how we view finances and how finances can end up, instead of us having control of it, it can have control of us. And so we want to talk about being free from that this Sunday. So if you want to walk in freedom in your finances, come this Sunday, and I promise you, you will be in good company with all the rest of us broken people, and how God can make that beautiful.
Very good. So we'll look forward to that. 10 a.m. this Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Join us on site. Join us online at weag.tv and hear that message from Shane. And if you're local, you'll be able to join us as well on Monday night at 7 p.m. for our workshop on that very topic. And we should be back here again live 1 week from today.
Excellent.
So hope to see you then. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. And of course, we were revealed on Sunday that 1 in 5 people are dealing with anxiety issues. So if you have a friend, family member, coworker, neighbor that you feel could benefit from the questions and answers that were in this video today, feel free to share it. A simple share button. You never know how that simple share could change someone's life. Have a blessed week. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah, thank you.